Ano ai me ke aloha ya kākoa pau, and welcome to our conversation on Mākau mo'omeheu, otherwise known as cultural competency. My name is Halena Kapuni-Reynolds, and I currently serve as a board member of the Hawaii Museums Association, a nonprofit dedicated to communication and cooperation amongst the staff and supporters of museums and related institutions in Hawaii. Thank you to the support of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. The Hawaii Museums Association was able to organize a series of webinars and filmed conversations around the topic of cultural competence in Hawaii's museums. And if you'd like to learn more about this initiative, please visit our website at www.hawaiimuseums.org/Mākau. Today we are filming from Hilo and Kaua'i, as we have organized two panels of esteemed museum professionals and cultural knowledge holders that will help us to understand the importance of cultural competence in making Hawaii's museums more relevant to local communities. Our first panel is being filmed at the Nāleo Hawaii television studio in Hilo, Hawaii, and consists of our cultural competence educators, including myself, Helen Wong Smith, and Dr. Tarisi Vunidilo. We'll be discussing cultural competency as a framework and sharing examples of how cultural competency can improve the relationships that museums have to their employees, volunteers, patrons, and artists. Our second panel, moderated by Frank Hay, is a conversation with cultural practitioners and knowledge holders hailing from the island of Kaua'i o Mano Kalanipo. Our Kaua'i colleagues are filming from their conversation at the Kaua'i Museum in Lihu'ik. And in this second panel, we've asked our practitioners and knowledge holders to reflect on the state of Kaua'i museums and repositories, and to speak about their experiences of collaborating with museums. And joining us on Kaua'i are Aletha Kaohi, Sabra Kauka, and Chucky Boy Chock. So without further ado, let's begin our program. So to begin our conversation on cultural competence, I just wanted to introduce or to talk a little bit about three olelo no'eau, or Hawaiian proverbial sayings, that kind of puts us in the mood to talk about cultural competence, that really expresses what cultural competence looks like from Hawaiian cultural knowledge, from a Hawaiian perspective. And so the first olelo no'eau that I'd like to share today is pa'akavaha, nana kamaka, ho'olohe ka pepeau, and hana kalima. And so this olelo no'eau simply translates as keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes open, your ears listening, and your hands busy. And the importance of this olelo no'eau, is that it expresses the importance of being able to not just contribute to various conversations, but to also know when it's important to take a seat back, to listen to those that have come to the table, to be a part of any given project that you're working on, but to also truly listen to what others are telling you with regards to what needs to happen for something to be accomplished. And so within this conversation, I bring up this olelo no'eau because it notes that when we reach out to cultural practitioners and we want to reach out to community members on various projects, it's important that we listen carefully to the issues and concerns that they raise, but to also develop outcomes for our projects that align with community goals. It's also important for us to listen and to learn from other staff members within our institutions that may not necessarily share our viewpoint. But once we are able to take a step back, to listen, to hear what other folks are saying, and to respond in a culturally competent way, we're able to accomplish our goals much better than before. So the second olelo no'eau I'd like to talk about today is a'ole pau ka'ike kahalau ho'okahi. All knowledge is not taught in the same school. One can learn from many sources. And this olelo no'eau is one that is very commonly heard within Hawaiian communities, and it expresses the importance of recognizing that we all weren't educated in the same place of learning, whether that's in elementary, middle school, or high school, or even college. But there's many, many places in which we are able to gain knowledge. Within the Hawaiian context, that might be a hula halau, which again, there are many, 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 many hula halau out there, with each kumu training their student in a particular way. And when we apply this to museum work, it essentially is alluding to the fact that just because you have a graduate degree doesn't necessarily mean you have the skills you need to do the kinds of projects you want to do, especially within Indigenous communities. It also means that beyond a graduate degree, there's other ways in which folks bring in their work experiences into their institution. It's not just training within a classroom setting, but training that they've received hands-on by working or being an apprentice to someone, by working at an institution for many, many years and just coming to learn skills that they thought they might not have used before. And to recognize that if we are going to diversify museums, then we need to do this in a way that we're not limiting who is able to work within our institutions. And part of that is not limiting who can apply simply because they have a graduate degree. So a'ole pauka ike ka halau ho'okahi. Lastly, our third olelo no eau is I ka olelo no keola, I ka olelo no ka make. Life is in speech and death is in speech. And in Hawaii, this particular saying is important because within the Hawaiian culture, what you say is very important and it has mana. It has an impact on what happens in the real world. And so when we speak of this olelo no eau for our purposes, we're saying that we want to have these meaningful conversations. We want to put out into the world that we need more cultural competence here at home and abroad, and that we are taking this very seriously. It's not just a bunch of conversations we're doing for fun, but really an opportunity to voice concerns, to raise points that institutions are already doing that are successes, to really just share about the current moment and the current state of museums and repositories in Hawaii in a way that continues to push us forward as our separate fields. So that's just a nice foundation for the conversations that we're going to be having today. So now I'd like to turn it over to our speakers. I've arranged a set of questions for each of them that they'll be responding to, followed by a brief conversation amongst us. So another set of questions that I've prepared for this conversation. So first, I'd like to turn it over to Helen Wong Smith. Aloha, Helen. Thank you for joining us today.
Mahalo, Halena.
And I was hoping if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey, and how long have you been engaged with cultural competency work?
Okay, well, I have been a librarian and archivist since, well, prior, a researcher like yourself, back in the days, in the 80s when I was a student under the Hawaiian Studies. There was no College of Hawaiian Studies at that time. It was just a liberal degree. You had to make up your own. And one of my mentors was Marion Kelly, the anthropologist, and she taught me so very much about working with different cultures and dealing with the non-diversity of our institutions back in the day. And went to, and when I realized that I was doing more research and I was encouraged to go to library school, I had moved to Hilo by then, and they said, well, you actually know this stuff. You read it. you should go to library school. So I focused in archives because the difference between libraries and archives is libraries have published materials and archives have unpublished materials. So if the archives are not properly processed and made available to the public, that's all hidden. Those are hidden treasures, which we hear that term thrown around quite often. I learned cultural competency when I was actually the librarian for the Daniel K. Inouye College of Pharmacy. Why I was teaching there, not good. I can't even pronounce drugs. But they said, yeah, but you can teach cultural competency. I went, yeah, that I can do. So at the time, I was on the council for the Society of American Archivists, and they kept talking about the mega issue. And I went, okay, what's the diversity? Mm-hmm. And I realized that it's such a huge issue that people were overwhelmed by it. How are we going to diversify without having your token indigenous person or your token someone from this particular culture. So I recommended at the time that they consider cultural competency because it's a framework. It's a method that can be applied to any culture, not just different ethnicities, but any culture, and that includes elderly, when we're dealing with ageism, with the LGBTQ, if it deals with homeless, people, veterans, people with PTSD, all these things. They're all cultures, and to recognize it. And so it's a nice holistic framework that you can apply. So I gave several presentations. It was warmly welcomed, and now I've been teaching across the country to librarians and archivists. And this is amazing. This Castle grad was invited by Harvard to go and speak to them about cultural competency, which is very interesting because I remember one of my questions in my workshop is, how, have you been the victim of stereotyping and cultural incompetence? And I went to a table and I said, okay, anything? And they went, no. And I went, oh my God, well, you have a different life than I have. So that's how I came to cultural competency. And so I'm so thrilled that HMA has this discussion going, because right here in our own home, when you've grown up here in the society that I grew up in, at the era that I grew up in, it's so easy to discount those of us who are not of particular color or didn't have a certain education. Those of us who didn't go to Way for college, all these things that you just feel like you're not valued enough. So that's why for HMA to consider this an integral part, and it's, I know who helped that along, is so exciting that we're bringing this conversation home.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your touring and on all of these workshops that you've given across the country.
Yeah, very strange places. Omaha. Yeah, they needed it in Omaha.
So you've briefly mentioned what cultural competency is as a framework that can be applied across cultures. Do you mind kind of elaborating more on the framework of cultural competency, what that might look like? But also, as you've done these workshops over the years, how might your definition of cultural competency, how has that changed over the years?
Well, there are so many, there's different terms. There's intercultural awareness, they call it, there's a lot of different terms that pretty much mean the same thing. And the definition that I've adopted and I feel most comfortable with is that it's the ability to function with awareness, knowledge, and interpersonal skill when engaging with people of different backgrounds, assumptions, beliefs, values, and behaviors. And so in order to do this, that's really far-reaching. So the reason you do this is that you should be able to combine cultural mindedness with culturally centered communication skills. So often people don't take the time to listen, like you said, from the Olelo No'iau, to listen and observe and just turn that on. Be cognizant of what that culture, how they communicate, their methodologies of, if you want to use the academic term, their methodologies, but just that awareness to realize what's appropriate, what's inappropriate, who do you speak to in the group, recognize that it may not be the person with the tie and suit, and so on. And so this will be able to form the basis for culturally competent organizations. So it starts at the interpersonal level, but it goes wider. This is why, when you say how it's changed, this is why it's kind of a buzzword now. And a lot of people are putting it in their mission statement, or they're saying, new policy, we are a diverse and inclusive organization. Well, that doesn't mean anything. If your individuals are not practicing it, and there's microaggressions and there's all these different things that are culturally incompetent, then, for instance, like you said, having the person who has worked there, toiled away for years, and nobody has been there and nobody asks their opinion, that's cultural incompetence to a level. So it's not going to start with a policy and say we're diverse and inclusive. It has to start at the interpersonal level, and then it goes up. So that's what kind of scares me. It's the definition has not changed. It's the application. And too often I see people, they'll send me an article and they say, oh, look, this is all about cultural competency. And I read it and I say, no, they did outreach to one group. That was it. A group that they had formerly not done outreach to. Okay, granted that, good for them. But how did they interact with that group? Did they come across like, we have your collection and your artifacts, so we're the experts, No, that's not cultural competency. So that's what I want to make people aware of, that is not cultural competency.
Absolutely. So my next question is elaborating more on the question that I've just asked, but if you could provide perhaps one or two examples of cultural competency and what that might look like from your own experiences.
Oh, okay. Not when I was a victim, huh? Too many of those. So, for instance, when I was ED at the Kaua'i Historical Society, what a fabulous collection that is. They are 104, 106 years old. Such a wonderful collection. Such a wonderful group. And I had undergraduate student interns, and you have a lot of people from Ni'ihau living on Kaua'i, and I had several students from KCC, and one of the gals, students, is from Ni'ihau, and she was a sweetheart, and she just didn't show up to work one day. And I knew that she took the bus from the west side where she was living to KCC and then to our office to work. And so I thought, okay, maybe, something happened to the bus. No, didn't show. And then the next time didn't show. So when she did come in, no word about it. No, I'm sorry, this is what happened. I said, are you okay? You didn't show up the last time. She goes, oh, my auntie wanted me to help her. And I said, oh, okay. Now, if you recognize that in the Hawaiian culture, as in most Polynesian and South Pacific cultures, family comes first. Family is absolutely first, no question. If you tell your niece, I want you to stay home and help me, the niece just, okay, And her not realizing that she should call me from home maybe, or, somehow get a message to me that she wasn't going to come in, that nothing's wrong. Because I was really concerned something was wrong, I'm not going to hold that against her. I'm not going to mark her down for her grade because she didn't do that. That's her culture. So that's one example. Another example, also on Kaua'i, is I know of a professional, PhD, who didn't understand a certain natural phenomena. I don't want to be too specific because we're doing this with Kaua'i people and they'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But he didn't understand a certain phenomena that happens on the island. And I said, well, have you asked the kupuna? Have you asked the elders, what causes this? And he goes, why would I ask them? They don't know, they're not a PhD. And I thought, ooh, that's painful. To discount in pharmacy, you say empirical knowledge. That's empirical knowledge. And that's bad enough. But when I found out that he goes to schools and talks to students trying to encourage them to go into this field, this profession, what if a student says, oh, my papa says, or my tutu said it's because of this? And, well, that's not science. That's not, that is scary. So that's culturally incompetent. So that's the kind of things that I want people to be aware of, whether you're in a museum or a library or any field. The cultural competency started in the medical field, and it's kind of grown to social work. There's a lot of literature in the social work field, and it's, I I introduced it to the archives, but the American Library Association has a whole office on diversity, and people are always trying to talk about how we diversify the profession. We don't have enough people of color or people of different cultures in our profession. Well, it's because your profession has to learn cultural competency. So,
absolutely fantastic. All right. So how do you think, Helen, can museums and other repository leaders make the space to practice cultural competency within their institutions?
Self-awareness and what you said, listen. I had a supervisor here at Hilo that invited Halena Silva. I mean, you can't get any more accomplished than and And when she came into she had him come into her office. First of all, she should have gone to Dr. Silva and told him everything she could do for him. We can do this for you, we can do that. And she never listened. Listen to what he wants. Listen to what he would like you to be able to give to him. Don't be telling him, ramming it down his throat, this is what we can do for you. So it's the self-awareness, because nobody's going to admit that they're culturally incompetent, excuse me. Nobody's going to admit that they try to destroy other cultures that are not their own. Nobody's going to admit that. But if you look at some of the literature, take training. There's a lot of online training now. And if you can get live training, great. But listen, and especially with the speakers that we're going to have from Kaua'i, then listen to what they're saying. How were they treated when they came into the institution? How were they treated when they tried to impart their knowledge to you? And too often the professionals say, oh, well, we have the collection. We're the experts. So listen to them and be aware of how you might have been not necessarily destructive, but maybe incompetent or pre-competent. Let's call it that. Let's call it pre-competent.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen.
Okay, mahalo.
All right. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Vunidilo a few questions. So thank you for joining us as well. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey and how you ended up becoming a museum studies scholar.
Mahalo nui for inviting me to be part of this talk story. Thank you to you, Helena, as well as to you, Helen. So I'm originally from Fiji, and I've lived in Aotearoa for about 18 years before I moved over to Hawaii 2 years ago. But my interest in museums, actually I have to give credit to you, Hilo. Because when I was studying in Fiji at the University of the South Pacific, on my second year, I was selected as a cultural exchange program student to Hilo. So I came over here in 1993, and I started taking anthropology classes and archaeology. And so in Fiji, these two fields, archaeology and anthropology, are not available. So, which means that most of the children my age and below, they have no idea what these two words mean. So I have to acknowledge Hawaii for opening my eyes to these fields of study. So when I returned to Fiji, before my graduation, I found a vacancy in the local newspaper, and it had the title Graduate Trainee Archaeology. And so when I looked at the word archaeology, I kind of like, I know that word. And so I opened the newspaper and I read it, and I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to put my name forward. So cut the long story short, I applied for it and I got it. So that opportunity for me to come to Hawaii allowed me to find that there was, even though I knew there was a museum in town, I knew growing up as an indigenous Fijian that the museum was only a place for tourists. That was a common understanding. And I remember growing up, museum was only a place where our young ones, like including me, used to be taken so that the older ones can sit for their exam, so that we don't create noise for them. So that's the whole thing I knew about museum. And then when I applied for it, I went back many years later to drop off my application. That just kind of deepened my passion to realize this is a cool place to work in. And so I've started working in the field, and it was very new at that time. No one knew what a person does in the museum. So when I was working in the field of archaeology, in the archaeology department, the whole nation, including my parents and my ohana, they thought I was a tour guide. I mean, I love our tour guides. I love the job that they do. But at that time, that's what the understanding was. The tourists come in, and the Fijians take them on the tour. But little do they know that I was also dealing with, excavations and going over to villages and talking to people, getting all the oral history. So there you go. That's in a nutshell how I came into the museum field. But also before that, my mom was a great storyteller who loved to tell stories when I was growing up. And I have passion for people, culture, as well as the environment. I was a very outdoor girl growing up. So combining the two and my love for culture, the museum was for me.
Fantastic. And based on some of your scholarship, the projects you've done, many projects in Aotearoa, could you talk a little bit more about the kind of work you've done over the years, reconnecting Fijian communities to museums around the world? And how does this work, your experiences, the projects you've been a part of, how does that demonstrate cultural competency in practice?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Thank you. When I started working at the Fiji Museum, I realized that there was only a few of us, a handful of us, who knew the amazing collections we had. There was only a few of us. And to me, deep down, I was thinking, I need to tell the whole world. I need to tell my fellow Fijians that we have amazing artifacts from where they come from. And so when I started doing archaeological digs around Fiji, I started a volunteer program. I went to my director and I said to her, I need to have more young people in the museum. She thought, there was something wrong with me because she said, where's the budget? And I was like, we don't need a budget. I just invite them and they should come here. And so the volunteer program started and we got school leavers who's sitting at home looking for jobs. These are indigenous Fijians. And I told them, look, rather than sitting at home waiting for the manna to fall from heaven, so that's just a little example, why don't you come to the museum and volunteer? And that way you can learn about the artifacts, you can learn some skills, and you can apply for jobs, and you can put volunteer work in your CV, and somebody might hire you. That happened. And so I was thinking, wow, if I can do it in Fiji, I can do it all over the world. And so my dream expanded from Fiji. So when I went to New Zealand, I did the same thing. I reached out to the community and I said to the parents, do you know that they have Fijian collections here? Most of them said no. Even when I was in Wellington, a lot of the parents never knew that the Te Papa Museum was free to enter. And secondly, they did know that there were artifacts there too for them to come and see. So I started that kind of, maybe I should call it a movement in a way, to work with the Ohanas and bring them in. So I did that in Aotearoa, I did that in Australia, I did the same thing in Sydney and Brisbane to invite the families to come over. And also when I was doing my PhD studies, when I went to the UK and Germany, I also did the same thing, just did some classes and bring people in. So to me, that was sort of cultural competency in action. I believe that if we focus on our young ones, our little ones, our keiki, the parents will join in. That's sort of like the formula. I've realized that if I'm going to work with the older people, maybe they might question me because I'm also young in age. But if I'm going to work with the younger ones, then the parents might be thinking, oh, maybe what Tarisi is doing is important. I should take my keiki to join them too. So the movement started, and then 2016, I was invited to be part of this Pacific Collections Access Project at the Auckland Museum, which is a marvelous program that I would love all museums around the world to do, to really open their museums and collections and get our people, our indigenous communities to come in. So those are just very briefly some of the work that I've done with my Fijian communities in Fiji, in Aotearoa, Australia, Europe, and now I'm here in Hawaii. So hopefully I can do more while I'm here.
Such a world traveler you are. All right. So in addition to the many, many wonderful things you've done around the world, Tarisi, you're also the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Museums Association, correct?
Yes.
And so I was wondering if you could talk more about PIMA as an organization and some of the plans for the association that you folks might be working on, but also the importance of having a regional Pacific Museum Association. Why is it important for the Pacific to have such an institution and association here in our beautiful Sea of Islands?
Thank you, mahalo. Yes. So again, I have to say there's something about Hawaii that it has impact in Oceania. In 1993, there was a meeting of museum directors of all the museums in Oceania held in Honolulu. It was hosted by the East-West Center. And through that meeting, all the museum directors that were there sat with Mali Voi, who was the UNESCO Director General based in Apia. So Mali is from Papua New Guinea. And they wanted to have an organization that bring all these museums together. Because, the Pacific Ocean is very diverse. Mm-hmm. We speak different languages. Even Papua New Guinea is over 800 languages. And also, on top of that, some countries speak English, some speak French, and Rapa Nui speak Spanish. And so just given that diversity, it is common sense to have PIMA to be formed, because we can become a one-stop shop for all these cultural organizations. So we've got about 45 museums and cultural centers across the region that can communicate with one another and can work together. And also we have a common goal. And when you have an organization like that, which is regional, we all work together, So despite all the different languages we speak and also the distance between, all these islands across the Pacific Ocean, PIMA can become that common voice, the common platform for all of us to come together. We can provide training, we can provide funding, and provide professional development for all our, museum staff. So I believe that PIMA really plays a very important role in our region, not only in the region, but also internationally. So we also work collaboratively with ICOMOS Pacifica, the Pacific Heritage Hub, with Piala, with Pabika, also with the Hawaii Museum Association. So we really kind of acknowledge the Hawaii Museum Association for working with us in 2010. And I think that's kind of where the seed was planted. And I'm so glad that I'm here in Hawaii, that I can be able to see this tree grow, and I can be able to look back across the ocean and invite all our museums to say, hey, we still have a lot of things that we can do together, training and working together in the future. So PIMA is a wonderful organization, and if any of you is listening, you can join our organization as well and come along and be part of this amazing organization.
Absolutely. All right. So I think let's skip over to a few questions for both of you to kind of go through together. And thank you very much for each of your responses. They were quite enlightening and just wonderful to hear more about you folks. So based on your experiences as, in your own rights, cultural competence educators, working at the local, so that would be Hawaii, the national, the United States, as well as international levels, how do you think the conversation around cultural competency is shifting in all of these various contexts?
You can start, and then I'll...
Go ahead. Go ahead. I have to ruminate about this one. I think that because our society itself is shifting, and people who have been disenfranchised are speaking up more, that is causing a shift. It was, when my mom was looking for jobs out of high school, back then it would say, in the paper, it would say AJA preferred, American Japanese ancestry preferred, And so as a pure Portuguese, she, knew, okay, well, I'm not going to get that secretarial job. So just the fact that, besides that's illegal now, but those kinds of things, and now with more and more people becoming who are from different cultures, not the traditional dominant culture, that facilitates the change. And also the pushback, and I think we'll hear that from we have heard that from some of our speakers in our webinars that we filmed previously, that I encourage everybody to go to the HMA website and listen to those webinars. We had some fabulous cultural practitioners saying how they were treated, and they are willing to speak out. When I've had certain things, which are now EEO violations against, as a recipient of these violations, I was of the mindset like, you know what? No, I'm not going to file. I don't want to rock the boat. It's not worth it. But now people are more willing to bring that forward and say, this is wrong. This is wrong. So something happened here at UH Hilo that it was myself and a woman of Hawaiian ancestry, and she called me up. She said, "Let's file an EEO," and I went, "No, I don't think don't want to rock the boat." And she did, and she won. So I think that's shifted so that now people who are in power have traditionally been able to ignore it are going to have to face it. And they're going to have to face it when they are culturally destructive. Someone's going to call them on it. So that's one example. And I think that nationally, our nation is becoming more and more diverse. So, demographics show that. And so we have to, organizations and institutions have to be aware of that. And my concern is that people just say they only think about the patrons, they only think about the tourists, they only think about who are we going to deal with. You have to think about the workforce. You have to think about, because if you're all from this homogeneous sector of these professionals that are not part of those different cultures, how can you possibly do an appropriate job to connect? And that's why it took Tarisi to go to these museums in Aotearoa and Australia and say, hey, you're not connecting. You've got all these artifacts, but you're not connecting. So if you don't have the person on the inside often making that bridge, then you will then always be considered for tourists only. And I've seen that happen locally too, and nationally, that people are so worried about maintaining, going for the dollars, going for the rich people. We're going to do fundraising. Oh, well, there's this. Let's say, I know that Flagstaff has a lot of money going from Phoenix. Everybody's going, it's too hot here. Let's move to Flagstaff. So they create these. They recognize a new moneyed, and that happens in Hawaii all the time. We got, these people in Princeville, they have all the money. Let's go after their dollars. And disenfranchising the multi-generational people. So as a result, those people say, you know what, we don't want to deal with you. You've ignored us all this time. We'll start our own. So I think that has changed. Now those disenfranchised people have social capital and financial capital that they can create their own, and they'll leave you behind.
The point that you made about these intermediaries, these people in between that serve as, in some ways, the liaison between the institutions that they might work for and the communities that the institution might want to bring in. I think that's such an important point to make, because really these kinds of projects and successful relationships that are formed and continue to be fostered, those are because of individuals who are putting in the work to do that. Tarisi is an example of one of those individuals within the Fijian community, of being a bridge really to connect Fijians worldwide to museums and to their collections, because at the end of the day, Indigenous collections belong to Indigenous peoples.
What a concept.
What a concept.
And it's been shown internationally, right? We're finally getting things coming back from Europe and coming back to Bishop Museum and what have you.
Yes,
So.
absolutely.
So Tarisi, would you like to respond? And in addition to kind of my question on some of your observations more broadly, I'd like you to speak a little bit more about, as someone who really has served as a liaison and as someone who has brought folks into the community, what were some of those important supports for you as an individual so that you could do this kind of work? And I ask this question in particular because oftentimes, as Helen has mentioned as well, there are these folks who are kind of the token native or the token brown person in the room or in the institution, who are hired to do and are expected to do a lot, but they don't necessarily have the proper tools, resources in order to do that. But in some of your projects, it sounds like you did have some of those resources and the institution was willing to work with you. So I was wondering if you could speak about that in relation to some of your observations of cultural competency at these various levels we've been discussing.
Cool, thank you. Yes, and I think to connect back to what Helen was saying earlier, and your question about the shift. So I've actually seen the evidence of that shift. One good example is migration. In the case of Fiji, we have a huge Fijian diaspora living outside of Fiji. So we have a huge community, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, US, you name it. You see Fijians there. They went over for different purposes, for sports, for careers. And so that's one reason, one of the causes of the shift. The other one that I could see is education. Because when we were growing up, a lot of the pressure that was given to us by our parents was go to school and get educated, but we were losing touch of our own language and our, cultural aspect of our lives. So those are kind of like the two reasons or factors contributing to that shift. But coming back to your question on what are the support that are given to people like myself and a few others who are becoming that bridge, which is the word you used before. Yes, I think it's being aware of who are our cultural leaders in these spaces. That was very key for me, knowing who are the people I can liaise with in Australia, in the US, in the UK. I was able to work through my ohana, so through my network. So I kind of identify certain leeway to get into the community and then identify who else I can work with. So definitely with the Fijian community, we have church pastors, we have community leaders from the 3 confederacies. So everywhere I go, I try to always be culturally alert and utilize the cultural framework that only Fijians know. And I often see that it works. So when I work with each of these organizations, kind of they feel respected. When I contact them and say, hey, I'm coming over, I would like to do some training or work at the museum. Would you like to be part of it? So that's kind of like the way I operate from the community level up. And at the same time, I try to work with the museum people, like the directors or the collection managers, and tell them, hey, did you know in Sydney, there's a big Fijian community there? And they were like, oh, really? Who should I contact? And so using the coconut wireless, as we use back in the islands, or in Aotearoa, they use the kumara vines, the uala vines, And when we use it and combine the two, it works. And so, and it becomes an enjoyable experience that I'm not rocking in and stepping on anybody's toes or ruffling some feathers. I kind of just come in and say, hey, the museum is here. Let's talk, or let's come and have fun. Let's dance and let's sing. And when we do that, the children will learn, and so the parents will be happy at the same time. So I hope that can be a learning experience for anyone listening to our talk story today.
Absolutely. All right, so we're actually winding down on our talk. I can't believe it's already been about 45 minutes. But to end our talk, we have 2 more questions. And the first question for both of you is, if you could give advice to students interested in working in museums and related historical repositories. And when I say students, I'm not just talking about, younger adults, even non-traditional students, older folks going to school for a second career, folks who are interested in doing something different. Speaking of students broadly, what would some advice be from you folks on this particular aspect of working in these institutions?
I would say that if don't be too proud to volunteer. I think a lot of people think that, if you're not compensated, you will be compensated. Just the knowledge, the experience alone. Have faith in what you bring. Because often, especially in Hawaii, so often the director is brought in from someplace else. We can be the underlings. We can be the long-term, middle management or lower or what have you, and that's fine. But when they're talking about the new ED, it's always somebody from the outside with their glowing CV and their better way of talking. than we may have. So I would say don't underestimate and don't disallow what you can bring to them. Don't come with an attitude, but definitely look for any opportunity. And sometimes you have to be creative the way Tarisi was. You know, I've done that too. It's like I say, hey, we can have archives, library students, you know, do this or what have you. And that happened several times throughout my career, was that I introduced the profession of archives to local kids, and we didn't know this thing existed. And they actually said, wow. I said, yes, and with your Hawaiian blood, you get these these benefits, you know. So they have basically their degree paid for or supplemented. So, and it's been very successful. I mean, several have gone, wow, I didn't know this existed. So, you know, it takes us to expose that. And Napoleon Iao has been doing this for 20 plus years. I used to work for them. That's not why, but that was David Singh's whole thing, is that expose them, make them realize that the only job for you is not construction or being a cashier. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but those are not the only things available to you. So somebody interested, you go in and you might be able to look at the organization and say, hey, would you like somebody to do this for you? You know, be proactive and ask them if there is some way that you can help them. And 9 times out of 10, they haven't even thought of that approach. So when you can come in and present that to them, then you'll be valued. So.
Fantastic. And Tarisi?
Yes, just to add on to that, you're using the word value. So I wanted to say 3 V's. So the first one is value your culture. And for our young ones to know that in the libraries, in the archives, in the museum, we have so much of our culture that are there. So if you value your culture, this can be a place where you can come and share the story to our younger generation. The other one is be visionary. You can be the visionary individual for your people, for your ohana. And the third one is volunteer. That's my favorite word. Ever since I entered the museum field in 1994, I've really kind of encouraged our young ones to volunteer. So don't be shy. If you're out there, looking for work and you couldn't find what you want to do, if you know you're passionate about culture, if you know you're passionate about your language and about your people, volunteer in any of these organizations. And you'll never know. The door will open, and then an opportunity will come for you.
I think I would just add, in terms of advice to students, would be that when you are volunteering at these institutions or when you're working with them, to not to be so quick to judge those who have done the work. Oftentimes, as a young person myself, there's a lot of criticism with regards to those working in these institutions without really knowing how difficult it can be for them to do the kinds of projects they want to do. There are the obligations that they have to do because of whatever the needs of the institution are. Yes. But oftentimes, it's important to take a step back, as I've mentioned at the beginning, to just listen and to get to know their story more, to hear about the folks they've worked with in the past, the folks that they still rely on for advice from the community. Sometimes, and oftentimes, those are the untold stories that we don't get to hear about because, whether or not it's published somewhere or if it goes crazy on social media, these kinds of stories aren't those kinds of stories. So it's always important to just be patient within those roles, talk to folks, try not to immediately judge them and decide, I don't want to work with this person, because that's not quite healthy in a lot of ways. But it doesn't push forward this idea of cultural competency that we're trying to purport. So that's a little bit of what I'd like to say to folks.
That sounds great.
So lastly, how can museums work with other heritage institutions such as museums, archives, historic sites, even gardens? How do we envision a better future for heritage in these institutions?
I would say start listening to your communities. I mean, too often people, and you're right, Helena, there's so many people who have been there and they're struggling just to keep the doors open. And so they may have had at one time the same types of dreams you did as well, but they didn't have the support. They may have had a board of trustees that actually said, no, we're not doing that. That's not the way we operate here. And they're waiting for certain people on the board to leave or die off or so what have you. So I think that be aware of your community and recognize how society has changed and be open to having fresh eyes. So if you have any of those cultural repositories or cultural heritage institutions that you named, I've done a lot of collaboration with, not just all librarians and all archives, but interaction and collaborating within organizations. Because if you recognize what they have and what the capital that they have, and you are able to make a connection with that one person, then there can create this project or product initiative that would be much more rich. So, for instance, if you have, let's say, museum, archives, and libraries working together, and then you invite the students or, volunteers or what have you, or you present it, and you say, okay, this is what, then you're giving them an option. Not every kid wants to be in the field. Yeah. I worked for an archaeologist. I was like, this is too hot. I'm going to go in the air-conditioned archives. So, not every facet of cultural heritage speaks to everyone. So the more collaboration you can present you to those young people or to even the elder hostel age, you can give them choices. So the more collaboration provides more choices to your community.
Good point.
And Tarisi?
Yeah, and I think, as Helen has mentioned, we have the same target audience, and we seem to kind of have a very similar kind of, collections. Some may have paper, some may have artifacts. And I remember working at the Auckland Museum for the Pacific Collection Access Project. So we were very artifact focused, and then we realized that within the museum, we also had a photography collection. And so we told them, hey, you're welcome to come and join us. So we had tables full of artifacts and tables full of photographs. See, that's a good example of collaboration, which is what, sometimes the left hand is not knowing what the right hand is doing, even within the same organization. But for our heritage organization, we have the same target audience. If we are very smart, we can be able to consolidate our funds and our resources for professional development, but at the same time, we can still identify a point of difference. And we can still excel in that area, but it doesn't mean one is lesser than the other. But we can say, what is something that we have in common? However, the museum can still do this, archives can still do this, and the libraries can still do this, and the gardens. And so it comes back to the 3 C's that I've always been championing ever since we started this project, which is community. We can't work without our community. We need to work with our people. Secondly, collaboration. And C is making sure that our culture, our people still remain in years to come.
Fantastic. Mahalo, Helen, Tarisi. Thank you so much for your contributions and for answering all of my questions. It was such a wonderful kind of space to be able to do this. So mahalo again.
Oh, mahalo to you. For being willing to picking up the torch, and you will excel far more.
Yeah. And we hope you, the viewers, also got something out of this conversation, especially around how you might be able to implement cultural competency within your own workspace, or if you want to continue having these conversations with folks within your institution or with folks within your own community. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to hand it over to our friends at the Kaua'i Museum for our second conversation.
Kaua'i Museum started out as a library back in 1922. And when the new library was built, this became Kaua'i Museum. And it opened on December 3rd, 1960 to the community. We are a museum that tells complete stories of the islands, of its people, and its beautiful stories. This year we mark 60 years. It's our 60th anniversary. When you come here, you will step into the original library of Kaua'i, and we will take you on a journey. So as we welcome you to the Kaua'i Museum, you will learn about our people, the many cultures, and how we live. You will learn from pre-contact right on up to our missionaries, onto our ethnic cultures like the Chinese, Portuguese, Filipino, Puerto Ricans. You will learn all about everything you need to know about Kaua'i. If you haven't been to Kaua'i Museum, you haven't seen Kaua'i or learned about Kaua'i.
Mahalo, Halena, and also Tarisi and Helen for that wonderful panel. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Hay, and I'm a board member of the Hawaii Museums Association and Huiolaka. Joining me today at the Kaua'i Museum are Aletha Kaohi, Sabra Kauka, and Chucky Boy Chock, three distinguished Kaua'i community members, cultural practitioners, and knowledge holders who have contributed greatly to the preservation and continuation of Kaua'i's vibrant culture. During our conversation this afternoon, they will discuss their experience working with museums, as well as their hopes and dreams for the future of Kaua'i institutions. Thank you all for joining us today. So, Aletha, if I may, start with you. Tell us about yourself and how you came to be such a valued member of the Kaua'i community.
I'm Aletha Kaohi. It is mid-June 1930. Mama was confined to bed to delay my birth. Papa looked into his umeke, into the wai'ike, and prayed that the child that was to be born would be one with wisdom, knowledge, and supernatural powers. His hope for Saltis was not to be. I was born on June 19, 25 hours short of the summer solstice. The seventh child of 8 children was born to William Kapahukaneolono Okainoaho Goodwin and Margaret Kamala Kama'i. I was named Aletha Kavelu Kavahine Hololeo Olimaloa Goodwin, an ancestral name. Unknown to me, everything I did or experienced was all part of learning to receive the ike, or to receive the ancestral knowledge. I grew up in Waimea Valley on ancestral land, surrounded by taro fields, watered by Pe'e Kaua'i, the Menehune ditch. And in the family home, on the wall, were these large portraits of my ancestors. In trunks were stored clothing and accessories, and in a wooden shed outside of the house was all of the wooden and stone implements. It was in 1928 and 29 that Bishop Museum hired my father as a guide to take Wendell Clark Bennett to catalog all of the historic sites that was listed by Dr. Thrum. The book was published by the Bishop Museum, now known as the Archaeology of Kaua'i, Bulletin number 80. I'm a retired public librarian with 36 years of service. I worked in this building, which was a library back then. I spent 7 years at the community college teaching Hawaiian culture. Spent another 11 years helping Waimea's elementary school in an after-school program. And presently, I am the manager and the Hawaiian consultant at the West Kaua'i Visitor Center.
Thank you, Aletha. Sabra, please.
Well, and I'm just enjoy your story so much, Auntie Aletha. Thank you so much. Years ago, I felt the call to return home to Hawaii, and I believe it was in 1987. After reading an article in the newspaper, I lived in Alaska at the time. There was an article that came out in Associated Press that spoke about the poor condition of Native Hawaiians in Hawaii. We had the highest incident of high school dropouts, highest rates of diabetes, highest rates of homelessness, and all of these statistics that really puzzled me. And I had to ask myself why. Because I was fortunate to have graduated from Kamehameha in the 60s and went on to college, university, and on with life. And all of my majority of my friends and my classmates were also upwardly mobile, went on to university as well. But then I realized that not everyone had a chance to do that. I had very supportive parents. In fact, I was cordially required to graduate and very supported in that by both my mother and father. And so I was living in Alaska at the time, and I got, those were the days when you would send a query letter to an editor to ask if you could do a story on a particular subject. And I sent a query letter to National Geographic. And the editor responded saying, yes, we're interested in you doing a story about Hawaii. And we discussed possibly doing a story on Ni'ihau. And they thought that because I was a Hawaiian, that I might have better access to a story about Ni'ihau. My interest in telling the story of Ni'ihau was to bring in the history of what has happened in the islands. So when I came home to the islands in Kaua'i and was introduced to the Robinson family by family friends, Auntie Grace Blake in particular, and quickly realized that they had absolutely no interest in any story in any magazine or newspaper about the island and the history of it, even though I find it very, very interesting and very beautiful. And so I did do some contract photography, photojournalism, and writing for a few years, and then Joanne Yukimura offered me the job of being her public information officer for her first term in office. And I was very honored to serve with her that first 2 years. But I also quickly realized that I did not want to make my living in politics. I give people who serve in those capacities great credit because it takes a tremendous amount of steel to do that. And so while I was working in there in December, I believe it's 1989, it was cold and rainy like it is today. And it was a little depressing because there were protests going on with the Hanalei boaters who were protesting against the community effort to move them from Hanalei to commercial harbors on the west side, like Port Allen and Kikiaola. And while I was there, so then in comes the door to the office, and where the Kaua'i Historical Society is now, is where my office was. And in comes the door of these happy, cheerful, music playing, hula dancing people with Wilma Place, Pohaku Nishimitsu, Uncle Vern Ka'uanui, and they were so happy, and they were sharing Hawaiian songs and hula and everything. Well, who are you people? Oh, we teach Hawaiian studies in the schools. And so for weeks, if not months afterwards, Wilma Place would come to my desk and drop off a little something for me to read and talk to me about, well, what are your plans? And so Actually, the day after I resigned from the mayor's office, I went immediately to work for Department of Education and Hawaiian Studies. I have been in Hawaiian Studies ever since and loved every minute of it. And today I teach at a private school, island school, kindergarten through 5th grade, plus high school hula. And I get to coordinate all the Hawaiian Studies kupuna, or cultural personal resources, they call them today, from Hanalei to Kekaha. And I absolutely enjoy that job, both jobs, very much. Mahalo for asking.
Thank you, Sabra. Chucky?
Thank you, sir. Hano e noho ma'anei. It's an honor to be in company of great kupuna of Kaua'i. And, you know, we all have our journeys to where we are today. And my journey, it's a little bit different. I always wanted to be a pro baseball player, but it never happened, obviously. And then plan B, you know, Papa always would say, so what are you going to do, my boy? And I said, well, I'm going to be a detective. I even went to school, took police science and so forth. Well, along the way, I had two roommates that today, well, one passed on. It was Rolling Casimiro, Bozo, and Mike Ava. We were roommates. And just watching their career and being part of that, their rehearsals and stuff, I'm like, I think I want to do that. To the displeasure of my papa. He said, what? I said, I think I want to play music. But anyway, and I enjoyed that journey. It was a close to 30-year journey. I am still involved, but not in the capacity of being on stage at all. My passion is to haku, to write music. I love that. And it brought me here. And this is what happened. About 10 years ago, in fact, exactly 10 years ago, I was asked to come and help Kaua'i Museum with different programs and create in fundraising. And so with their 50th anniversary was the reason for it. It was coming up, so we had a lot of reason to plan a celebration. And so I called my best friend to come over and let's discuss this. His name is Crash Kealoha, no longer with us. And so we had a meeting, and he said, well, Chucky, what do you want to do? I said, I'm not sure, but I'm going to pick your brain, and then let's go, because we've done business together. And so what started was a musical concert with Robert Casimiro. And but not just any concert. It had to be something very intimate because we wanted it to be in the museum. And it still continues today. And because of COVID, we had to cancel this year. But the other thing that we wanted to do is they already had this May Day, Lay Day program in place. Mrs. Pomeroy, Irma Lee Pomeroy, and they created that, and to honor her vision and her legacy in lei making, Crash said, why don't we bring all as much as we can in the lei makers all over the state? Well, we couldn't, of course. It was hard, so we brought Auntie Bobby Meheula over to be one of the judges. And we also brought back Kepa Malley, who was part of this museum. And I forgot who the other judge was. But having Auntie Bobby was great, kind of like Auntie Alethea, very feisty. You think they're 40 years old, you know? And I think they're about the same age. She's in her 90s too, and but she was so feisty. I mean, she built her log cabin home. That just had to throw that in. I couldn't believe that. But she took the made a lay contest or program to a whole nother level because of the workshops that she did with the community. And so that kind of really solidified its place in the community, that Kaua'i Museum. We have a lot of wonderful lay contests around the island. But with Auntie Bobby, kind of took it to that level where everybody was like, oh, we better. In fact, she taught our judges how to judge. You know, you bring in a lay, it's not what you see on the outside. She immediately turns it over and says, and then she starts looking at how you put it together. That's the important part of the lay. But anyway, that's all I wanted to do was help the museum. I had no dreams or anything to be part of the museum. And years later, it opened up, and the position, and I know I wasn't the first choice. That I know. But given that choice, I'm still here today, and it's been 6 years in this position. And I'm very privileged and honored to be here to serve the community. So thank you for even having this workshop here at Kaua'i Museum. Welcome, everybody. Mahalo and aloha.
Thank you, Chucky. That was wonderful. And I know that you still play once in a while on a stage, and I'm honored to have experienced and enjoyed your music too. I'd like to ask Aletha, because I know that you've been active in Huiolaka, the Kaua'i Museum. I know that it was your dream to set up the West Kauai Visitor Center. And so what is it that excites you about Kauai's museums and our related institutions? What excites you?
Well, I can only speak for the institutions that I actually use, because each institution, whether it's Kauai Museums or Kauai Historical Society, each has a different kind of repository. But what excites me is when there are new items that surface. And it's either loaned to an institution or it might be gifted to an institution. I'm excited right now because a gift of a Russian musket, and I see you have some bullets here. May I borrow them for my exhibit?
Of course you can, because we have a bunch.
This is a Russian musket that was found at Princeville in an old building years ago, and the fellow that inherited it gave it to the state parks. And the state parks asked me if I would display it, because it kind of ties in with Pa'ulaula, the Russian fort. Besides that, there was a cannonball found by a tourist at Pa'ulaula. And so I had this call and said, we called the museum, and they said, call Auntie Aletha that she might be able to help you. Give me 10 minutes, and I was there at the fort. It had rained very hard, and then it had washed out the trail going into the fort, and it exposed this cannonball. So this tourist that picked it up was leaving the very next day for Asia. She didn't know what to do with it. She didn't want to leave it there because she knew it had cultural value. So we picked it up, and then I called Victoria Wickman, and now that she's retired, Martha Yent is trying to find out where is the cannonball, because she wants to also have us use it. There's also another thing that they found at the fort was an anchor. It's a huge stone anchor with a groove across, so where you can attach and lash the rock to anchor. It was a stone anchor for a canoe, you know. So that's what excites me, you know, when we see new things. And then I also get excited when I can help someone and they have a better understanding of our Hawaiian culture. If you work with the Hawaii Tourism Association, they always try to have the visitor and the residents to interact. Sometimes it's not easy to interact these two separate groups, you know. So you have to find something that will interest them. And then, so to me, when someone walks out of the visitor center, they have a better understanding of who we are and accept who we are. You know, that's really a thing. Most of the items that we have at the visitor center is borrowed. The Goodwin collection dominates thing. I grew up, I get excited when I see new things because I grew up with portraits, all of those things in trunks, and you had to dust them or take them out each year and hang them out smelling mothballs. Then you fold them up and you put them away. As a child, I didn't enjoy that. But today, I say, thank you, Papa. Thank you for saving all of these things. He said when the plows and the hoes and the rakes came, he picked up all of the OOs and saved them. So this really excites me. And of course, I enjoy sharing whatever we have with the public. Thank you.
Yes, beautiful.
Thank you, Aletha. Sabra,
Well,
what excites you about
Well,
our museum?
I kind of grew up in a museum. My aunt was Eleanor Williamson, and she worked at Bishop Museum. So as a child, when we went to meet her at the museum, we were able to walk through those hallowed halls of Bishop Museum, and there were many artifacts that were on shelves along the way, and you'd stop and you'd look at them, and occasionally you'd run your hand over a beautiful stone or something. So I was always fascinated with that. And it's probably one of the reasons why I majored in anthropology when I went to the university. But then coming back home here on Kaua'i, I became interested in learning to make kapa again. And at first it was I wanted to make a kapa kihe for hula, for halau. And then I was asked by, a dear friend who has since passed, to please make some kapa for the reinterment of Iwi Kupuna, who had come back to Kaua'i. So that was another turn that we took into making kapa to take care of the kupuna. And one of the first reinterments that we did was in Nualolokai. And just a few days before Hurricane Iniki in August of 1992. But what excites me about Kaua'i museums today is that I'm able to bring my students to see the collections so that they understand all the work that went into making many of these things, because there was no machinery, at the time. So if they wanted a beautiful adze, they had to make it. If they wanted beautiful kapa tools, they had to carve it themselves. And I have been so blessed. Grove Farm Homestead Museum has been very, very open to sharing their collection of kapa and the kapa tools that they have there. And I look forward to being able to see the kapa collection here at Kaua'i Museum as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabra. And I know, Chucky, with that smile, you were excited.
Well, because our exhibit center should be done at the end of December, and so while she was touching upon that, I got all excited because of that. Because one of the exhibits is to not only have our collection out there, but also to have people like Kumu Sabra and Kamalo Dupree and all of these kapa makers come here and talk story with the community and share how it's made and how it's done and so forth, you know. To continue the traditions of all our traditions it's so important today, especially for our keiki, for example, like our kapa. And what excites me about Kaua'i and all the repositories we have, she mentioned Grove Farm. They talk about they tell their stories about the plantation life and so forth. And they also are, there's a sister museum out in Hanalei, in Waioli, the Waioli Museum. That too is really, really a beautiful hidden treasure. But there's also the Veterans Museum. Now, I made some phone calls and I didn't realize they talked about the Civil War, and like, the what? The Civil War? Okay. I said to my daughters, do you guys heard of the Civil War? Dad, it's part of our curriculum. Oh, I didn't hear that one when I was in school. But, and of course, Holo Apoloka or Go for Broke, their gem is the 442nd. And let's not forget all the other stories that they have there, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. So another hidden gem, But also exciting is our living, or the newfound repositories. For example, like Kione Hanau o Kalanianole, the birthplace of Prince Kuhio. They're starting to open it up. The Royal Order of Kamehameha, down in Hawaii, down in Lauai side, Koloa. But they keep finding new things. And the exciting part is the community around there, they're giving this to the order to maintain, so it lives, But just around the corner, there's all these live hidden repositories that we don't even know about, Keau Naismith and all of them, they opened up, what is that? Can't even, so sorry, I'm just lost for words on that one. That's an ancient Makahiki site, ancient village and stuff that is intact, and correct me if I'm wrong about, I think that's one of the major finds throughout the state, so that is a repository in itself that lives, that's going to live on forever. That was a new find. It was always in the bushes, so this is what excites me. All our different, you can walk through time at Limahuli, and so Koke'e, just so many beautiful repositories here on Kaua'i. Thank you.
Thank you, Chucky. Lisa, you talked about sharing through the Technology Center, and I know that you've spent a great deal of your life sharing knowledge through the libraries, through the Hawaiian culture. How can we improve? How can we do better? How can we teach?
How do we improve what we're doing? Well, first I think we need to know what we have and how to retrieve it. I failed in that because wait, I can retrieve memory, but sometimes I can't retrieve it from my files because they're not labeled correctly. Okay, so I'm just being honest, Okay.
You're not alone.
As a reference librarian, I knew how and where to find the answer for a question. And so I have to apply that same thought when someone comes in for asking us a question, yeah? Are all of our things inventoried? No. Do we know what we have in our collection? No. I don't know. I personally do not know what I really have. So I have to speak for my failure. What I haven't done with the collection, which is called the Goodwin Collection. Yeah. We have clothing of my grandmother. I mean, for her, it was her underwear, but they call it now mu'u, and we wear it out on the street. So I think we need to hang grandma's underwear up and say, this is an underwear, but today, because things have changed so rapidly. But one of the things that every item, even a stone, has a story. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And have we recorded that story? So when I have children, classes that come to me, I have this squid lure. Mm-hmm. It used to have a bone on it for a hook. Right. Well, never caught any hair. So Papa changed it to a metal hook. Mm-hmm. But I always told the children that here, this bone was once there, but never caught any hair. I drop it on the floor. And that lure will turn with the weight at the bottom. If you know what the lure is like, yeah. It's a stone that's kind of half with a little groove, and that is attached to a cowrie shell. When you drop it into the hole where the he'e is, or the squid, octopus, it will land stone down, cowrie shell up on the top. Okay? When the he'e pounces onto that because they want to get the animal out of that cowrie shell, boom, you hook it. Okay? If you get a little one, no problem. Just stick your finger underneath, pulley the thing over, paralyzed. But if you get a big he'e with 8 tentacles, it can wrap you with their tentacles. And when I ask the children that, they go, oh, you know. And in all of the years that I have worked at the Visitor Center, which is nearly 22 years, only 9 people have ever told me what you get, how do you paralyze a he'e that has wrapped you? You're out on the reef, you don't have a hammer. Chucky Boy, do you know that? Okay. Sabra, how about you? What was this?
The eyes.
With your fingers?
If that's all you have.
You bite the eye.
I couldn't.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine the facial expressions when you tell children that? You bite the eye.
I couldn't.
Maybe your hands are all wrapped up, so it's bite the eye.
Crunch.
And it will paralyze you. So, to me, our artifacts have to be labeled, even though they're not on display. And I fail to do all of that. I have 10 more years, I'm told, to live. And so I hope to get that all accomplished. I hope my granddaughter is listening. And I hope when this is aired, that my ohana is listening, because this is what I dream that one day when I'm gone, they're going to bring up U-Haul, empty everything into the U-Haul, and out to the dump.
No way. They're not going to dump.
No. But if you don't have it identified, what is it? It's no use. If it's just a piece of rock, there's no value to anyone. So it needs to be cataloged. That's what, I can only speak for myself. I don't know how other things, but an inventory. Bishop Museum did inventory all of our artifacts, the stone and wooden. However, 80% was stolen.
What?
Yeah. And may I just add this? It was then that my father realized that he had to recover the knowledge that was covered with the tapa. My great-grandmother was a kahuna anana. Okay? She was a deflector, counter-sorcerer. My great-grandfather was the kahuna, or not kahuna, kahu, as he liked to be called, of the Wai'ike. Now, Wai'ike is used when a kahuna has haumana or students, and they cannot see, they cannot hear, they cannot feel, yet they've been in the class with everyone else. Then my great-grandfather will go and get this Wai'ike. It is in a very special place in Waimea. And the eyes are washed of these children. If they fail to hear, feel, see the unseen, hear, they are then dismissed and taken back to their family. Okay? This is the kind of things that I was raised with. And so I don't know how to improve except probably to record everything that we have. I even have a kapamoi of Kaua'i. Kapamoi. So I cannot speak for other institutions. I gotta speak only of what we have as a family. And, I just hope that I can get it done before God calls me by surprise.
Hey, thank you, Aletha. I know that Anya will have quite a bit of work ahead of her, and you're certainly a fine example for all of us.
Yeah.
Inventory. I know, for example, that Kaua'i Museum and the Hui Olaka may not have a complete inventory of what we have. I seriously doubt it. And I'm looking out here.
I know, yeah.
I see many, many things, and I pray that they are inventoried, and I speak from my own experience and
Well,
my own collection, my own things, the few things that I have. I wish that I had, I aspire to the same as you, to record what I've collected over the years, whatever they may be.
Well, I want to say something about Chucky Boy. He brought life to this museum.
Right.
I came here once right after he had gotten in, and he took everything out of the basement. And in one corner, he had all these steps and all of these stones and wooden things, just no labels, no nothing. But he took it out of the basement. And if you recall, there was a bowl. And I asked him, Chucky Boy, can you tell me what that is? Ollie, I don't know what it is. What did I say to you, Chucky Boy? It's a finger bowl that is used by the aristocratic Hawaiians. It has a little knob in the center, or maybe it's a bowl with water. It's passed around after you eat. Your fingers are all sticky with poi. You wash your hands and take off that. And then the kahu takes it, throw away, bring you fresh water. I have one, so I knew what it was. So this is the kind of thing I would say, improvement. Well, you're talking about what we can do now, but he already has done a lot and brought life to this place.
Bravo, my friend, bravo. I know, Sabra, you're doing the same at Island School with your students.
Yeah, we've been gifted some beautiful things. It's not a very large collection, but it is a collection of some beautiful stone tools. And I really need to investigate a little bit further and contact the donor to get a little more information of, okay, where did this come from? How did we receive it? And I'm looking at I want to display it in a beautiful case that the children can observe. And actually, I have allowed them to feel. Well, some of them are ulumaika, so they can feel the stones. But after that introduction to them, the next thing I know, they're going out on the playground and they're picking up stones on the playground and they're going on the side and they're trying to shape those stones into bowls or into ulumaika. And then I get a note saying, please tell the children not to leave the stones on the grass because the lawnmower is going to come and will wreck the blade and everything. So children, please, if you're going to pick up stones on the playground, make sure you put them back in where the tea leaves and everything are growing. Don't leave them out. But it opened up a whole area of imagination for them and an appreciation for the work that goes into making stone tools. And it's boys and girls. It's not just boys who are interested in this. There's little girls out there too. They're picking up things and scraping them and trying to make tools out of them. So it's opened up a whole world of fascination. It continues.
Marvelous. Chucky.
Boy, Auntie, thank you. Thank you so much, Auntie. It was 6 years ago. I was going to say that Auntie came by when the change, it's like a football team and you got a football coach. He's going to bring in his own style of play. Or a baseball coach, right? It's what you know. And new direction. So it was time for a change, and it wasn't easy because there was a line. I did not want to cross the line and offend anyone. But there was so much beautiful things here that needed to be shared to the community. And Auntie, that was just a confirmation that you shared that story because that was the start. That was the start of identifying these artifacts that we had no clue what it was. You were the first.
I could have identified all your stones.
So now we took us years, but we've gotten to a place where we're getting there. There's so much like your collection. I'm not sure we're going to ever do it in this generation because we got about, I want to say we got about 300,000 pieces that we don't know who it was from. There are some we know, but they don't know where they got it from. Sometimes you want to know that history. Like Auntie said, each artifact tells a story. It tells great stories. I mean, it could have been the Kaua'i that made Kaua'i's wa'au, things like that. And so I think what we brought here was at the Tutupuku'i's book, Book of Proverbs, Pupu kahi I holumua, is unite to move forward or unite to progress. we have to come together and share mana'o to identify these, call different friends and to help, and very appreciative of all the help we get. We're still asking questions. It's hard to identify everything, because sometimes you think it's a canoe breaker and it's an anchor. The stones, it looks like a stone, but so we have to be very careful to identify, and it's not easy. And like Auntie's Mopuna, he got a lot of work. I think he got to work with Puna right away, because there's so much of a collection that help you identify. And so and when you help Puna, you'll have their knowledge in you already, all their mana'o from her. And I think some of that gets lost here. So we guess at times, or we consult with others, friends in the Bishop Museum and so forth. But the place we're at today, and from 6 years ago, though we have more steps to climb, it was the community was a big part of it that we brought in. Anyway.
Thanks, Chucky. And that is one of the reasons for these sets of workshops, that we can bring institutions, we, the Hawaii Museums Association, can bring institutions together to solve very common problems. What is it, for example? What is that stone? What is that pohaku? How were these used, etc.? I'd like to turn now. We're all involved in education in various ways. What would you advise a Hawaiian student who wants to know more about working in museums, working with the culture? What would you tell them?
Well, my parents enrolled me at Kamehameha School because of World War II. In our backyard, a whole battalion moved in. My horses had to go. Our piggery, which was our livelihood, the army took over our property. I was a very angry child. I threw tantrums at age 12.
Right.
My doctor, Marvin Bernicki, suggested that I change. I'd be sent to an aunt or somebody to care for me temporarily. So my parents enrolled me at Kamehameha School as an 8th grader. Like any country Hawaiian kid who ate poi 2 times a day was a cultural shock. No more poi at Kamehameha School. They gave me tamale pie instead, cornmeal. I was homesick, but fortunately, my father was hired by the Navy to teach a welding class to apprentice because so many ships were damaged at Pearl Harbor. So Papa is in the city of Honolulu, and it was a joy for me. We spent Saturdays visiting Chinatown, A'ala, which was College Walk, where my father went to St. Louis. It was called St. Louis College, but it was a high school. Then we graduated a little better. We went to the Honolulu Art Academy on Beretania Street. They have a new name now. Bishop Museum. All of these places, my father took me on Saturday.
So Auntie Aletha, you didn't have to live up in the dorm?
No, only a Saturday. We came out on Saturday.
Okay, so you were at the dorm.
A day out from school.
Okay.
But you know what we really enjoyed doing? Going to People's Cafe on 4th Street and eating poi. Okay.
Bravo.
In my junior year at Kamehameha, I was the only one in the junior and senior class that had a driver's license. When you have two brothers, one and sandwiched between two brothers, you learn how to drive. You also learn how to change a tire.
Oh, yeah. That's what we had to do then.
So I was very privileged to drive the students to the Honolulu Medical Group after school. I had to wait for them. Did my homework. Sometimes I would walk across the street to the Hawaii Library, which is the main library in downtown Honolulu. Another time I would walk over to the archives and met all the archivists there, made friends with them. And Francis Fraser
Yes.
eventually moved to Kaua'i.
Yes.
These were people that influenced me.
Very much.
And then I wanted to volunteer at Bishop Museum. I had to get a special permit. I had to see Harold Kent, the president of Kamehameha School. But he was writing at that time, he is an author of a book about different kinds of winds and all kinds of things, Hawaiian words. So he became interested. Oh, called Dr. Donald Mitchell.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that name? He's published several books up for Kamehameha. He took me under his wing, and I would get a ride down with the new driver, because there now we have a senior that has a driver's license. And on her way down, she dropped me off at the Bishop Museum, but I needed a ride home. So Dr. Mitchell always gave me a ride home. I would go 3 times, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Wow, you lucky. I only got to go once a week.
Then I met Mary Kavena Pukui, and didn't realize that Peli Pukui was her daughter that was attending Kamehameha School. What a small world. So all of these people have influenced me in at different levels, yeah? But I remember going down, there's a street, I think it's called A'ala, along the A'ala Canal, and they have all of these old antique stores. And this is where Papa would take me. And they're all dark, and he has specific things in mind that he's looking for. Coins, Hawaiian coins, And then finally, I guess, I just joined him and became a collector too. So that's really, really how I saw me being what I am today. So I say to anyone, young people, first go volunteer.
Yeah.
Don't expect to get paid. But when I was at the University of Hawaii, I volunteered in downtown Main Library because that was a quiet place for me to study. And the bus line was just enough for me to get safe for me to get onto the bus late at night and get home to Auntie's house. Okay. Well, something happened one day when this woman came in with a group of children on Saturday morning. My job was to shelve books back, put back some, we call it shelving in library, but to other people is replacing books onto the shelf in its proper place. And she started to cough, and she had this spasm. And the poor kids were there, and they were, getting, and she kept coughing, and finally she had to get up And I grabbed the book from her, it was a picture book, and I finished the story with the children. The children were restless. The teacher wasn't back. So, okay, let's all be giants. Let's get up and let's stretch and let's be the biggest giant you can be. And now, let's be a little mini huni. And as they went down, I said, and you can sit down. What am I going to do with them? I told them the story about the Menehune ditch. And then I told them the story of the Ni'ihau giant. All myths. The children loved it. Do you know I got hired from a volunteer? So, young people, volunteer, you may get hired.
Bravo, Aletha.
Then I worked for, then when I came back to Kaua'i, I worked for the public library.
I know that Sabra was also a volunteer at the Bishop Museum, as was I.
Yes.
Oh yeah, what year?
Would have been in the 60s, 61,
Mine was about
62,
46,
63, yeah.
46, 47, 48.
And I was delighted to meet the greats of Pacific anthropology and archaeology, Kenneth Emery, Yoshi Shinoto, Roger Green, Pat Kirsch, so many people who were of the previous generation and of our generation now. I'm so fortunate, all because my friend said, go volunteer at the Bishop Museum. You're interested in Hawaiian material culture, the things that they make, go volunteer. And I did.
The other thing is that when I went to the main library, Library of Hawaii, they asked me, had I ever worked in the library? I said, no. And I saw Pacific Hawaii room. I said, can I work in the Hawaii Pacific room? I got to know all the books. You know, so it's you don't realize that by volunteering, you acquire so much knowledge. Yeah. Bishop Museum I did dusting. I did a lot of dusting, filing, because I print well. I made signs, you know, we didn't have typewriters that enlarged it, you know, so I did calligraphy for them. And so that was my experience. So that's why I'm interested in not only library, I'm also interested in preserving our Hawaiian culture.
Marvelous. Thank you, Aletha. Sabra, what would you advise your students?
Well, at Island School, we have a requirement that they put in a certain number of community service hours. And so we encourage them always to volunteer at a place that interests you. And they do. Some volunteer, well, they used to volunteer at hospitals, some volunteer at Alekoko Fish Pond. Every summer I take them in and they volunteer in Nuololokai. There's some of them who even volunteer down at the Botanical Garden or used to be able to. But I've always encouraged my students to follow your interests. If your interests are in the ocean, volunteer with something related to the ocean. If your interest is in cooking, volunteer, you know. Just go into those areas, put a little time in to see if that's really what you want to study, and what really, really excites you is volunteer.
Bravo. Chucky, volunteer opportunities at the Kaua'i Museum?
It happened. You know what Kumu, Kauka, and Puna shared about volunteering? I've never heard that growing up. You know, I was just a jock. I was into sports. I was selfish. I always wanted to play ball, you know, and I don't think Papa ever told me that. I always had to help him, but I never, nothing to do with volunteer. But fast forward to hear Puna and you talk about volunteer, I think it's so important because if you speak to 10 Kamali, 10 keiki, and you talk about volunteering, if one of them listens, that one is the one that, you spoke volumes to, and it's inspiring to have people like you to inspire kids, because you never know who's going to listen. And I tell that to my daughters too. Volunteer, but they're still learning about volunteering, so important to volunteer. And I think that, and Haname Tapu Uvai, that day comes, you will work with your heart. I think that's important, that no agenda, you come with this. I think that's very Hawaiian.
Aye, indeed it is. There are many opportunities in Hawaii's museums to volunteer, and we, on behalf of the Hawaii Museums Association, I'd recommend getting something in which you're interested, whether it be a museum or a garden, wherever it may be, or cooking, to develop your talents, develop your interest. What is that I'm interested in? Go look. What are your hopes and dreams for Kauai's museums, for Hawaii's museums overall? Aletha?
Well, I think that question is really open, and I don't know how many repositories we have on the island. I really don't know. I mean, I know of some, but there are many families that have valuable items in their house that do not know that what cultural value it has, And so I thought that we might meet as members of different institutions, come together, exchange ideas, and sponsor community workshops. Like, as I said, families that have artifacts, antiques, heirlooms, And then when, especially, not only Hawaiian, but when I talk about culture, it can be all ethnic groups, especially Japanese. They have a lot of things, And so even though we may be with the visitor center, we cover all cultures. We don't only do Hawaiian. And so I borrow a lot of things, especially if you're doing sugar plantation. Sugar plantation has all of the migratory groups that came in. So you have all these different cultures, So I think if we come together as a group, sponsor workshops, how to preserve, this is community. So those that have collections at home can say, oh, hey, that thing, gotta save that, And how do you preserve paper? Tape? Is it climate controlled? Do AC? I mean, what are these things that might help a family, or even us for that reason? So that's I was looking for that, and also maybe a loan program when someone is doing a special exhibit of maybe in their place. I was thinking like in Waimea, 1820, 200 years this year, having an exhibit about the coming of the Protestant missionaries. But what do we have except the Bible? What do we have? But maybe someone out there has something that they can lend to this special thing. So I looked at a loan program. But that goes also with insurance. Insurance. Because when my papa used to lend his things out, the only place that he could insure it with was Lloyd's of London. I don't know about today. I have to tell you that my things are not insured at the visitor center. they will not insure it. So, you know, are there insurance companies that do? I don't know. Because I don't, you know, I'm all on faith and trust. Faith and trust, that's how I move. But if you're asking someone to lend you something, you know, you cannot, you have to make sure that that loan program from institutions and loans from individual families. I just recently lost, she's actually my cousin's wife. She just passed, Grace Kaua'i, Malina from Kipukai. She loaned me a lot of things. Kaula'ili, rawhide, the saddle stick covered with rawhide, chaps, okay? Now that she has passed, she left a note. Auntie will take care of it. They are not to come and get it from me. It is to Auntie's to take care of it. She does, you know, this is her last words. And her daughter brought it to me. Missy Kaua'i is her daughter, and which is my cousin's daughter. She came to me and she said, Auntie, all of the things that Mama loaned you is now yours. So, not that we want to take somebody's things, but if they don't know what to do with it. Yeah, she was worried about, well, you gotta oil it. I gotta oil the kaula'ili. It was gonna get real too stiff. This is a rawhide. So that's why I thought about sponsoring, co-sponsoring.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's why I said I thought it was important. I don't know how you folks feel, but.
Totally on board.
Yeah? Now, I don't like meetings now. I don't need to go to meetings. But I think at this time,
Workshop.
we need to collaborate to sponsor.
Okay.
Yeah. Reading instructions on how to preserve, gotta be hands-on. This is what you do. This is, yeah.
That's a really good idea. I know this last year, sometime during this past year, Helen Wong Smith came, and we did a workshop on how to preserve kapa. And it was very, very well received. For instance, you mentioned mothballs. You know how you used to put things in mothballs? Well, I have kapa that I had mothballs in, and that's a no-no.
Okay, you're talking about the kapa fabric or the tapa?
No, kapa.
Tapa, okay.
Right, yeah. And I didn't know you're not supposed to use mothballs in there. And you're not supposed to fold them the same way every time. And the best way to do it is on a roller, you know. But it's like, oh my gosh, okay. Yeah, so it's very, very, we really should. Let's do sponsor some more workshops.
Great idea, Sabra. Chucky.
Well, the only thing I can say about this question, which is very important, is each repository that we have, not only on Kaua'i, but throughout the state, is for us to know each other, to support each other. Like, I met Mr. Kawamura, but only by phone, you know, but I'd like to know what he looks like. You know, at the Veterans Museum. Right. He's one of the historians there. So a lot of these people, you talk to them by phone, but we need to support each other and know each other and know what stories each repository tells. It's like for Kaua'i, we tell our Kaua'i stories, all of us. And we all have our unique stories, you know, the stories of the Vahipana or the specific areas, the special places in their area. But who are these people that are the caretakers? You know, we want to know. We should meet each other because we want to support each other. So if friends go to Moku Okeawe and says, oh, you got to go see Brother Kimo at Lyman Museum, when you tell them Kaua'i said aloha, You know, things like that. I believe that we are in the same ohana, but we need to know each other. You know, there was a museum I went to in Honolulu, and I took my staff, and I said, can we get a discount? They said no. And I said, okay. But if they came here and they work for an institution, we would allow you to come. We share the aloha. Things like that. We need to know each other. I think so. I'm not scolding, but just I think about stuff like that because we were just saying, ohana, puna is our po. You know, so. Yeah, so I'm not saying who it was or I'm not blaming anyone, but little things like that can go a long way because we would support that institution. Oh, they're aloha, whoo, you know.
Indeed. Chucky, thank you very much. Sabra, Aletha, I'm very grateful for your time and for your mana'o today. We're all on that same path, and we're differing steps on that path, but I applaud each and every one of you for your fine work for Kaua'i and for our islands. So that brings an end to our second conversation on Kaua'i. I want to say mahalo again to Aletha, to Sabra, and Chucky Boy for your generosity and participation in today's event. We are truly grateful for your help. Now I'd like to turn it over to Helena to offer some concluding remarks. Helena?
Mahalo e Frank. That was an excellent conversation. No leila, ua ho'ea kākou I ka hopena o keia papahana. We've reached the end of this program, and we hope that you enjoy joining us on this journey today. Again, if you'd like to know more about the Hawaii Museums Association and our Cultural Competency Program, visit our website at www.hawaiimuseums.org/Mākau to learn more. Mahaloa nui loa. We hope to see you next time. Aloha no.